So before we started meditating, I asked you a few questions about birth, life, and death. Where do we come from before we're born? Where do we go after we die? And what is the purpose of our life while we're alive? These questions all point us to try to understand the true nature of our being. So let's dig into that a little more. Where did you come from before you were born? Did you come from nothing? Did you appear out of nowhere? Is it even possible for something to appear out of nothing? All of the scientific evidence we have, and all of my own experiences, seem to suggest that it's impossible for something to come out of nothing. Everything that exists seems to be contingent upon something else. In Buddhism, we say that everything comes from emptiness. The Sanskrit word for this is Śūnyatā. Emptiness is not the same thing as nothing. They're different words for a reason. Emptiness contains nothing, but it is not nothing. Emptiness is like a void. A void creates a vacuum which pulls things into it. This pull creates potential. This potential is what draws things into existence. This is the fundamental force that created our universe. This force doesn't have a name, but we could call it the force of creation for the purpose of this discussion. Potential is also a form of energy. When I use the word love, I'm referring to this force of creation. When I say love, I mean it in a more universal sense. Interpersonal human love is only one form or manifestation of this energy. There's clear evidence of a creative force at work in our world. We can use our body to create things. We can bring something from our imagination that does not currently exist or that only exists within our mind, and we can bring that thing out into observable reality. This is precisely what all of our technology is. We use science to create this technology, but still, science can't explain where these ideas came from. So where do these ideas come from? They come from our mind. The source of our creations is our mind. The creative force is the force that our mind exerts on reality. In our human lives, this force manifests in so many ways. The creative force is on display anytime we create an original piece of art or writing. It's also the force that drives us to procreate, reproduce, and make babies. In fact, anytime we act with our bodies, we're creating changes in the universe. So why do we create? Why do we live, reproduce, and continue to perpetuate life? It's an instinct built into the foundation of our being. These are questions that have been contemplated since humans developed self-awareness. But the universe is vast, and it may be infinite, so it's difficult to comprehend. This is why we create conceptual forms or mental constructs to represent the things in our world. This is the purpose of names, words, and language. We use words to create conceptual boundaries that are finite so that we can try to understand a smaller subset of our seemingly infinite universe. For instance, we say this is a table. We define what a table is so that we have the same understanding of what it is and how it's useful. We also recognize that everything outside of this table is not the table. By doing this, we create an imaginary boundary. We arbitrarily separate some set of things from its environment so that we can define what it is, because it helps us navigate our world and understand how we can interact with it. Initially, we evolved to instinctually focus on the things immediately surrounding us that can affect our body. Now we've developed science, mathematics, and technology to understand even more about our universe far beyond our planet. But our knowledge is still extremely limited. Ultimately, to continue to expand our knowledge, we'll have to understand our mind and the way it works. However, the mind is not material. It's composed of the very same emptiness that gave birth to our universe. So how can we even begin to understand this emptiness? Our conceptual forms, mental constructs, and words can help us understand our surroundings, but if we focus too much on the forms, we'll be unable to understand the vastness of what's beyond the forms. To continue to expand our knowledge, we'll need to reach beyond the limits of our current dogmatic approach. It might help us if we realize that all of the conceptual boundaries that we create are nothing more than mental constructs that help us navigate the world. These boundaries are incredibly useful, but they also hide the underlying truth about our reality. Our mind is the origin of all of our observations and everything we understand. The challenge to understanding our mind is that it's infinite and eternal, which are concepts that are nearly impossible for us to rationally understand and comprehend. In order to overcome this shortcoming, we've evolved to create finite forms that help us understand smaller parts of this infinite realm. For instance, time is a mental construct. It's actually infinite. But we create smaller segments, such as seconds, minutes, and hours, which we can comprehend because it's at a scale that's relevant to our lives. We do the same thing with geometry and mathematics, but it's slightly harder to explain. For instance, a point is an infinitesimally small dot. A line is an infinite amount of connected dots. A circle has an infinite amount of dots around its circumference, which is equidistant from a point at its center. These are just a few relatively simple examples of how we use things that are infinite and infinitesimally small to create a concept which is finite that we can rationally comprehend. Most of us are trained through our language to rationalize our entire reality in this way. These ideas can be helpful to understanding our universe, but if we want to understand the deeper underlying truth, we have to recognize that these are mental constructs that will always limit us from a comprehensive understanding. All of these conceptual forms are defined in a way so that we can derive information from what's contained within them. For instance, once we've defined a circle, we can use a mathematical formula to determine the area inside of it. The area is rational information about the amount of two-dimensional emptiness inside the circle. In this way, we're able to gather information about the emptiness. In essence, every form that we perceive in nature serves the purpose of conveying this type of information, including life forms. Life forms are obviously much more complex, but I think it might be useful to view life forms as vehicles for collecting information about reality for our mind. All of the properties and information within these forms has been compartmentalized by the conceptual boundaries. All of the conceptual forms and mental constructs are not reality. They merely represent reality in our imagination. They only exist in our mind. In truth, none of these lines or boundaries actually exist. Ultimately, these lines are what separates us from the underlying truth. We've evolved like this so that we can understand our world in a way that helps us survive. We survive, reproduce, and continually create new concepts and technology so that we can continue to expand our knowledge about the truth of nature. You could say that the purpose of our existence is to understand ourselves and our surroundings. However, I don't think we evolved based on some complex algorithm. It seems more akin to a process of trial and error. In our effort to survive, we make certain postulations or assumptions about our reality, such as what's safe to eat. If our postulations are false, we experience suffering or die. If they're true, it makes it easier for us to survive and thrive. When you're thriving, it feels as if you're in complete harmony with the universe. When I look around the world at humanity, I see a species that's incredibly good at surviving, but is also mired in suffering. This is partially because we've become hyper-focused on ourselves as individuals. We've learned to overemphasize the artificial boundaries that separate us, which has caused us to lose sight of the fact that we're connected to each other. When we work in harmony with nature and with each other, our creations can provide us with a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world we live in. So I suspect I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know. This is the reason we seek connection and community. The reason I started holding these meditation classes was to provide a place for this community to meet, so that we could all connect. This pull to connect comes from our heart, and it's ingrained in all of us through our intuition. When we experience this pull, we often refer to it as the feeling of love. When we don't acknowledge and understand these connections to each other, it can lead to suffering. If our purpose is to understand ourselves and our world, it would behoove us to work together. We need to help each other so we can better understand our connections. Helping others to overcome their suffering is compassion. Compassion is what brings us together, and it's a pure expression of love. Love is the force of our mind that compels us to create so we can learn about ourselves. When we help each other, we can learn from each other and accelerate this process. I suggest to you that the purpose of life is to understand ourselves and to find harmony with nature. When you feel harmony with nature, you're in heaven. When you experience dissonance and dissociation, you feel like you're in hell. These feelings are your intuition, which is the force of your mind guiding you towards the direction you need to go. However, too much thinking can overwhelm your mind and make it hard to hear your intuition. In tonight's talk, I started out by asking you koans about birth, life, and death. Birth, life, and death are just examples of artificial lines that we've created to compartmentalize and separate things that we don't fully understand. Meditation is a technique that you can use to clear your mind. When your mind is clear, these lines dissolve into the emptiness and reveal that everything is connected. There are no lines between birth, life, and death. And there are no lines between you and me and everything in nature. We created these lines with our words. So don't become too attached or fixated on my words. They're only my attempt to help you find your direction. At best, my words should only be thought of as metaphors, trying to point you towards an experience that transcends words. To experience this connection and find harmony with yourself, just start meditating a little bit every day. Learn how to focus on your actions in such a way that they also become like a mantra. Then everything you do can become a meditation, and your mind will always be clear. When your mind is clear, it becomes like a mirror, reflecting the heavens through eternity. This is the path to nirvana, the complete liberation from suffering. If you want to pursue this path, clear your mind and follow your heart in the direction it's compelling you to go. Just keep taking steps in that direction until you reach your destination. I wish you all good luck in this journey.